Before this video gets started, I want to take the time to wish happy birthday to a very special subscriber. You know who you are. Thanks for all the love and support you give me. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. So happy birthday. Let's begin. Number 1. Hey guys. This story was pretty terrifying even for me, a 6'2", 21-year-old guy. I've always been an unlucky guy, so I'll be posting on here pretty often. At the time of this incident, I was a sophomore in university. I'm a bass player in the jazz band there, and I frequently have a lot of late-night gigs. On a Saturday night performance, I was tearing up the sheet music on my stand, not literally, and I had a great time. This event ended around 12:30 a.m. After I put my bass in my band locker, I left. My fellow band members were going to a bar to party afterwards, and I wasn't in the mood. I carpooled with a friend to get there, and he ended up leaving early, so I was on my own. Campus buses stopped picking people up at midnight, so I was forced to walk. It was about a 20-minute walk back to my apartment. I felt very safe walking, though. About 5 minutes into the walk, I saw this suspicious-looking man looking into the transparent doors to some of the apartment buildings. Stupidly, no red flags went off in my head, and I just thought he was lost. Once I passed him, he turned towards me and ran the other way into the woods behind the apartments. This was odd because once I got a look at his face, I didn't recognize him. In fact, I don't think he'd even went to the school. Campus security is very strict on outsiders entering the school grounds without going to the front office for permission. I just kept walking and tried not to think about it. Midway into the walk, I would have to walk up a small hill and pass by the woods. I was really sleepy and I decided to take a shortcut through the woods. This was mistake number 1. I walked through this rocky, complex, uneven path through the woods. This would deplete 5 minutes for my trip. I heard some rustling to my right and it startled me. I just thought it was an animal. At that time, I had forgotten about the suspicious man earlier, till I started noticing that I wasn't even going to my apartment complex and that I was going deeper into the woods. I suddenly had a feeling of absolute dread. I quickly turned around and started walking back to the sidewalk to get to my apartment. I felt like I was being followed, and I quickly took a glance behind me. To my horror, I saw the silhouette of a man, the same man from earlier. He had a huge grin on his face. He gave me this unnerving glare. Once he noticed I was looking at him, he started cackling like a maniac. At this point, I was getting freaked out, but what horrified me the most was what he was holding. I shit you not. I saw a knife in his hand, and I ran faster than I ever had in my life. It was one of those chef knives for cutting vegetables. Even though I was faster than him, I truly thought I was going to die. Once I came to a clearing in the woods, I ran down another path in the direction of my apartment complex. This was mistake number 2. It only took me 2 minutes to get to the building, and I fished my campus card to swipe it at the door. I made it in seconds before the guy got to the glass door. He was banging repeatedly at the door, scratching the knife on it. I didn't wait a second before sprinting up the 5 flights of stairs to my floor. Once I got into my apartment, I peeked out the window, which overlooks the front of the building and the street. I could see that he was still at the glass door, peering inside. I opened my window just enough so that I could see him, but he couldn't see me, or so I thought. I yelled, "Hey asshole, leave me the hell alone," as an attempt to get him away from the door. This was my worst and final mistake I could ever make in this situation. The man heard my comment and looked up towards the window. I knew I fucked up when I saw that evil grin forming on his face again. Then he walked away into the woods, out of sight. For the next 2 weeks, the man was nowhere to be found. I kept it to myself and didn't share it with anyone. The incident started to fade to the back of my memory because of schoolwork and projects. I was starting to think the guy gave up and that I was getting less paranoid, but sadly, the story doesn't end here. When I was cycling home one Friday night, and I docked my bike at the front of the building, I noticed movement at my window, and I squinted to see clearly. I took out my LED portable bike light and shone it at my window. What I saw made my heart skip a beat. At my window, I saw the man from weeks before peering out at me. He had that same fucking grin again, which soon turned to more cackling. I called the police, the actual police, because the campus police don't do shit, and they got there in 10 minutes. They went inside my apartment while I waited outside. I heard one of them yell, "Hey fucker, drop the knife," which sent a chill down my spine. Soon after this, the 2 officers came out with a middle-aged man. The man wasn't even struggling. He was just staring at me as the officers took him to their cruiser. I soon found out that the man was hiding behind a tree when one of my neighbors was going into the building. She was stabbed to death, and her body was dumped in the woods. He took her key card and opened the glass door. He somehow knew my room number and picked my lock. He was waiting behind my shower curtain with a knife when he saw the police. I'm glad this piece of shit is serving a life sentence now. The scariest part about this was that he didn't even attempt to steal anything. He just had the desire to murder. So to the fucking piece of shit that murdered one of my neighbors and tried to kill me, let's not meet. Number 2. I came home to find my mom standing outside in the driveway, looking relieved to see me. She told me that someone had just been in the back garden while she was asleep. She'd been napping on the couch in the living room. She had the doors from the living room to the conservatory and the conservatory to the back garden open because we have dogs, and it was a hot sunny day. She woke from her nap, and this is what she told me first. A guy was standing still at the back door staring at her. Now, we have a long garden. There's no plausible reason why this guy would have been standing there. My mom, being the pleasant English lady she is, apparently smiled at this guy and said, "Hello?" before he quickly turned and walked back down our garden, where he would have had to climb through trees and bushes to escape. However, not before muttering something like, "I was trying to find my ball." After my mom had gotten over her post-nap haze, the reality of the garden intruder set in, and she went outside to the driveway, where she somehow felt safer, and was about to contact somebody, which is when I came home. We went back in the house and checked that he wasn't still lingering in the garden, and when we realized all was clear, we did the British thing and sat down for a nice cup of tea. I sat down on the couch, right where my mom would have had her head during her nap. Mom, you told me that he was standing in the garden, right? But from here, you can't see into the garden. My mom recreates her napping pose, and sure enough, for her to see the guy, he would have had to been standing inside the house, just staring at her in silence. By this time, we decided to call the police because it had gone from garden intruder to creepy living room nap starer. They took it very seriously. So seriously that they didn't send anyone until around 1 a.m. in the morning. Seriously, police? That is not the time to show up at a woman's house when she's just had a fright. Remember, I said the doors were open because we have dogs. Yeah, those dogs are useless. Number 3. This took place in 2013. After graduating college, I was about to embark on a summer-long road trip that I had been planning for over a year. At the last minute, my friends bailed on me, but being the adventurous sort, I decided not to let it stop me, so I packed up the guitar and went on my way by myself. This is how I came to be a 26-year-old girl, road tripping it across the country, alone. Since I was very poor, I was camping in national forests or rest stops, and I lived out of a borrowed minivan. All was going well, and I was having the time of my life. However, a few months in, I had made it to California and was traveling around the Vallejo, San Francisco area. One night I was looking for a new place to camp out. Found myself on a Bay Area highway, wrought with unusual detours. Because the detours were confusing and poorly marked, I found myself driving through a small town, uncertain if I was still following the detour or not. It was about 9 p.m., but since it was a small town, no one seemed to be out and about to ask directions from. I tried to use my phone, but the signal was crummy and my phone sucked to begin with. Figures, I mumbled and threw my useless phone on the passenger seat. It seemed I was getting out of town and into some kind of warehouse district, but I could see the highway up ahead in the distance, so I decided to head towards it anyways. The single road I was on led me through rows of factories, but there was nowhere to turn off. I still headed towards the highway. I passed a large old car. I'm terrible at identifying cars, but it's the kind you would call a boat. Very cool, classic car kind of thing. I saw this car in the parking lot of a factory. When I passed, he switched on his headlights and pulled out behind me. I honestly didn't think anything of it. I figured the poor guy was lost too, and followed me thinking I knew where I was going. I continue on for a while with him still behind me, and I finally reach where the highway passes over the road. Much to my dismay, I turned a corner into a gravel lot of sorts that dead-ended into a fence right underneath the highway. There was no way to get onto the highway. This is where it gets creepy. The gravel area was about 2 lanes wide, but the large car pulled up behind me directly in the middle, so I couldn't get around him. This raised an immediate red flag, but I just tried to convince myself that he was just a lost guy, and his parking in an inconvenient way was merely an accident. However, I didn't want to get out of the van and ask him to move, so I began trying to come up with a plan. I pulled a little closer towards the fence, as if trying to make a U-turn. I already knew there would not be enough room, but what he did next frightened me. As the nose of my van came up against the fence, he pulled up to the fence too, at an angle blocking me from going anywhere. Now I knew he was up to no good, and now I could get a look at him, as we were very close to each other. He had a baseball cap, a crazy ZZ Top style beard. To give you a picture, I was in the right of the 2 lanes, with a crazy man blocking me to the left, and to my right was 3 cement pylons, what you usually see blocking off highway construction. The pylons ran the length of the lot with the car width, not the length but the width of the front of a car, and it went in between them. Here's where I take a bow to the gods of dumb luck, as I saw something in those pylons that most would not. You see, prior to this road trip, I had spent 8 years as a bus driver, and much of that time was spent training new drivers. One of the maneuvers on the commercial driving test in my state was called the backwards serpentine. To pass, you had to back the bus through 3 cones positioned in a straight line. Since the cones are only a bus width apart, not length, you must turn at exactly the right time to master this move. It was very similar to what I was looking at now, although doing it with cones is a little different than a cement block, because if I crashed into the cement block, I would certainly not be able to drive out of there, and who knows what this man had in mind for me. I gunned it in reverse, keeping the maneuver I had taught myself so many times in my head. Keep in mind, driving tests are graded on accuracy, not speed, so this was the first time I had ever had to do this fast. By the time I had made it around the second pylon, he realized what was happening, but because he had a big car and was pushed up against a fence, it took him a few wiggles to get turned around. By then I had completed my maneuver and took the fuck off back down the road. He followed, but there was no way to know if he was chasing me or fleeing, as there was only one way in or out of that place. I was so scared, because I was still lost, and presumably this man knew the area, if he had picked this spot to wait for lost tourists, so I wasn't out of the woods yet. Pumped full of adrenaline, I screamed out the open window, "You picked the wrong girl to play driving games with, motherfucker!" I then heard a tiny robotic voice say, "No results for driving games, motherfucker." I was confused for a minute, then remembered the useless navigator on my phone, which I had discarded. It had been flung to the floor of the passenger side during the ordeal, and I wasn't about to stop to grab it, so I just began screaming, "I-80," the top of my lungs. Finally, the phone heard me and gave me directions back to the highway. I drove around the area highways, stopping at gas stations to observe the other vehicles getting off, at least a few times to make sure I wasn't being followed. Luckily, it was a pretty distinctive car, but still I did this over an hour before I felt safe enough to camp out. So creepy bearded man, let's not meet. Thanks for listening, guys. I want to thank you all for the love and support that you give me on a daily basis. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Sinful Society if you haven't already. Please remember to follow me on Instagram, guys, as well as Twitter. And I do have a Patreon account too. No pressure there. But if you guys do feel like making a small donation, feel free to go on to Patreon. My Patreon is under the Sinful Savant as well. Until we meet again, guys, stay sinful.